Hi there, I'm the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. And I offer this devotion as a balm for the heart, for the mind, for the spirit, and for the soul. And it's titled Salvation Here and Now. It's not about being saved from life, but to be saved by life, in life, for life. I have a friend named Neil. We've known each other for 20 years now. And I think it's fair to say that when we first met, we didn't see eye to eye. We lived very, very different lives, came from very, very different worlds, really. But we kind of came together because we both suffered from a common problem. But that's not what led to us becoming friends. That kind of just developed over time, really, as we actually got to know one another properly, not what we appeared to be to one another. And we've been on a spiritual journey alongside one another. Some of that time it's been very close, others not so much really. There have been many, many parallels and crossings over the last 20 years. As I say, we were on a spiritual journey, often together and sometimes not. At one time we were both became members at the Unitarian Chapel in central Manchester, Cross Street Chapel. These days, Neil, though, is a Catholic. He's returned to the faith of his upbringing. He's very much a man with a very open heart and mind and soul, though. And you know, he's open to so many other things, but he finds that's where he belongs spiritually. Whereas I'm a Unitarian minister, of course. Now, I conducted Neil's wedding to Rosemary. It was the second wedding I ever conducted about 12 years ago now. Now, while I didn't introduce them to each other, I had met Rosemary before Neil did. When I was a student minister at King Edward Street Chapel in Macclesfield, the home of Macclesfield Unitarians, Rosemary had started attending there at the same time that I became a student minister, and we got to know one another. Now, sometime later, they must have both been on some kind of dating site, and they met one another online. They got talking and realised that they had someone in common, namely me. And they obviously a romance developed which led to a marriage and a wonderful partnership they are. Both of them have very strong personalities though, as the best people do. Rosemary also has some physical problems, some health troubles, and Neil has been a loving and devoted husband throughout the years. She's even survived his terrible jokes and puns. Now, Neil retired from his previous job and then decided to go back into education and follow his real first love, which is history, something else that we shared in common actually. So he did a degree and then a master's and then a PhD, and he had his PhD published on Irish history. I can't remember exactly, Irish history in Manchester in the 19th century actually. Wonderful work. And like I said earlier, at different times, Neil and I have drifted apart and then reconnected. And over the last couple of years, our friendship has kind of redeveloped once again. And over this period, he's been a very supportive friend to me during some difficult times personally. We see each other most Fridays, and last Friday we met as we often do, and he told me that he was meeting up with his brother, Jed. This was wonderful to hear, as I know they'd fallen out a few years ago. They'd had their differences about life and the world, the kind of things that seems to cause so much division in families and society these days. But Neil wanted to make things right. His brother had been his best man at his wedding, so I had met him once before, Jed. The two brothers that are so unalike, they don't even look alike actually, but they are brothers. Anyway, Neil plucked up the courage to contact his brother Jed's son and offer the hand of friendship. The hand of friendship between two brothers. So that afternoon, he met his brother Jed. They were meeting in a coffee shop. I saw them a little later together, and I cannot begin to tell you how much seeing that beaming smile on Jed's face, how much it touched my heart. It was just wonderful seeing two brothers reconciled with one another. Neil told me later, when I met him, I hugged him and said, "I love you, Jed. After that, it was as it should be with brothers. It touched my heart. And actually, my heart had been touched a little earlier as I saw two men who had fallen out, reconciling over one another, both admitting fault and reconnecting. So it was great to then see Neil and Jed doing the same thing. If only the world would behave like that, eh? Now, one thing I'm very grateful for in my life is that I have never fallen out with any of my siblings, and nor have they fallen out with me, despite the many troubles and fallings out there has been in our large and complicated family. In fact, none of them have fallen out with each other, as far as I know. This includes all the half-siblings and the step-siblings and the ex-step-siblings too. We've all been through some really tough and difficult times, but we vowed really between ourselves that these things would never destroy our relationships with each other. I do hope that we keep it that way. I certainly will do my best to ensure that. Seeing Neil and Jed together reminded me of a verse from chapter 5 in Matthew's Gospel from the Sermon on the Mount. Now, the Sermon on the Mount to me is the essence of the teachings of Jesus. Something, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not, seems to be a kind of a great code to live by, actually. Gandhi, a Hindu, believes so anyway. And the verse that I was thinking of, though, is as follows. Verses 23 to 26. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Basically, it's no use proclaiming faith, etc., showing your piety to your God if your human relationships are a mess. Unhealthy pride can be so destructive in human relationships, and so often it is the levelling of pride that leads to reconciliation. It takes faith and love and courage to build the bridges of reconciliation. It takes someone to make the first move to bring healing for their relationship, but also the wider relationships with life. You see, if two people are in conflict, it is not only those two individuals who are damaged by the conflict, all who are connected to them are damaged too. Reconciliation can bring healing to so many. I see this every single day, just as I see the damage done by disputes and resentment. So damaging. And it not just to the two individuals, but to all whose lives are touched by them. In life, there are many things that separate we human beings, often our beliefs and our disbeliefs, whether these be religious or anti-religious, political, social, cultural. We separate ourselves through them, and yet we're all human. Some people really play on this. We all love and we all grieve when we lose those that we love, don't we? To quote Eugene Ionesco, ideologies separate us. Dreams and anguish bring us together. We are united, by a common humanity, united by our shared hopes and despairs. We are each of us unique and complete as ourselves, and yet we only truly know ourselves through our relationships with one another and with life. To quote Mark Nepo, it is a great paradox of being that each of us is born complete, and yet we need contact with life in order to be whole. Somehow we need each other to know that completeness, though we are never finished in that journey. I know how precious my relationships with others are to my own well-being, so if they're fractured in any way, it affects my inner life too. No one lives separate from the outer life. The outer life and the inner life are intimately connected, a bit like the Mobius strip that I once saw Parker J. Palmer talk about. They kind of interact with each other. The outer life and the inner life are not separate. They weave into one another and each affects the other. Now, sadly, we're all living in ever-dividing and divisive times, it seems. So often we fail to see ourselves as one people. And this is so dangerous. Not only is it dangerous to ourselves, but to our shared humanity. By separating ourselves, we will never know wholeness. We will never truly be all that we can be. No one is an island. We need to be at one not only with ourselves, but with all of life. And whatever it is, of course, that we believe is at the core of all life. To be complete ourselves, we need to be complete in these relationships. And in doing so, we kind of touch a sense of perfection. Perfection in its original meaning, of course, meaning completeness. By the way, this is what salvation means. To quote good old Forest Church, what I'm talking about is salvation. The Latin root salve means health. The Teutonic cognates health, hail, whole and holy all share this same root. Being agnostic about the afterlife, I look for salvation here. Not to be saved from life, but to be saved by life, in life, for life. I'll just repeat that wonderful, wonderful quotation, or the last bit actually. I look for salvation here. Not to be saved from life, but to be saved by life, in life, for life. He continues, such salvation has three dimensions. Integrity or individual wholeness comes when we make peace with ourselves. Reconciliation or shared wholeness comes when we make peace with our neighbours, especially with our loved ones. Redemption, in the largest sense, comes when we make peace with life and with death, with being itself, with God. What a wonderful writer, what a wonderful man Forest Church must have been. Not perfect though, by the way. Learnt from making the mistakes that we all make. But when we experience this wholeness, we are as close as we can ever be to perfection, to completeness, although only for a moment as our lives then go on. We begin to truly live our lives, and life is the greatest gift of all, the ultimate grace. So choose life. This thinking kind of brought me back to the Sermon on the Mount. This time though, to the final verse, verse 48 of the 5th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, which reads, therefore be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And if we live this way, this is heaven here on earth. This is the kingdom of love right here, right now. And for me, this is the purpose of the spiritual life. This is the religion of love, of true communal spirituality. This is what it means to live in perfect love. Perfection is not flawlessness as we often think it is. Quite the opposite, actually. Perfect love is sincere. It's not that it's without flaw, but it's about showing our cracks, our flaws, our scars, showing who we truly are. The Latin root of perfection is perfectus, which meant completeness or wholeness, health in mind, body and spirit, wholeness with self, wholeness with others, wholeness with life, and wholeness with God. And for me, that's the whole point of spiritual communities like the ones I attempt to serve. This is the purpose of a free religious faith, if you like, to live this way, to bring this about, or at least to try to. Maybe this is how we become whole. This is how we become one with ourselves, with one another, with God. But how? Well, it begins by being present to what we are doing right here, right now. It begins by not being caught too much in worry and fear our own, not to live from these things. It's about going into things gently and softly, not hardly and charging and willing things, but opening ourselves to one another, opening ourselves to life, not focusing too hard and intensely, by being open to other things, by being open to one another, by being open to things beyond our current understanding. It begins with humility, really, because it's humility that leads to openness. You know, we're never truly whole, complete, unless we are at one with ourselves, at one with one another, at one with life, and at one with whatever we believe is that power that permeates all of life. what I call God. We can never truly become ourselves alone. This is why true community, true free community, is so vital to the spiritual life. We need right relationship to become wholly who we are. To me, this is the purpose of the communities that I serve. This is what we aim for. This is our ideal. It's why I'm recording this for you today. Yes, it's about becoming who we truly are, but this cannot be done in isolation. The inner life and the outer life have to work in harmony, like the Mobius strip. It's the purpose of free religion to bring this around, I believe. It allows the birth of the true spirit in each of us, but no one can completely give birth to themselves by themselves alone. We cannot become wholly who we are alone in isolation. We need to be responsible for ourselves, but we can't do it in isolation. To repeat those words of Mark Nepo I shared earlier, it is a great paradox of being that each of us is born complete, and yet we need contact with life in order to be whole. Somehow we need each other to know that completeness, though we are never finished in that journey. And where does it begin? What can we do to start? By healing our relationships. It begins with reconciliation, by putting things right with our relationships with ourselves, our God, those important people in our lives, in our families, in our communities, in putting things right in our relationships with the whole of life. And then you might find that your relationships, your inner life, heals and brings wholeness too. Salvation, salve, health, all these things that come from the same thing. This is salvation here and now. It's not about being saved from life, but to be saved by life, in life, for life. I'm going to repeat that. This is salvation here and now. It's not about being saved from life, but to be saved by life, in life, for life. Amen. I'm going to end with some final words of blessing. You know, we all need to bless more, and we can all bless. We bless when we give ourselves wholeheartedly, completely to life. So may we all live in peace, embraced by the light and the warmth of our wholeness, our oneness, our completeness, in love, ready again to struggle on, and in beauty, shining forth like a lamp for freedom. Let's shine bright. And may the infinite light shine in and through us, and may it do so in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, and in all that we do. Go in love, go in peace. Amen.